It's a joy to be with you today because Bob Joyce is a dear, dear friend of Bernadette and me. I met Bob about 20 years ago. I heard about him running for office down in West Roxbury, and I went down to help him. And over the years, one of the things you can always know about Bob is he'll be with you when you win and when you lose. And I learned really early on what a fighter Bob Joyce was. One of the things we did was we started knocking on certain doors, asking people to vote, for Bob. And, Bob is a pretty even-keeled most of the time. He tries to convince people with solid arguments. But one day, we were at this door, and there was a middle-aged couple came out, and Bob started to make his pitch, and you could tell right away these people wanted none of it. Bob started to try to go a little further, and one of the comments that was made was very disparaging to Bob, and I had never seen Bob get upset. Well, on this particular moment, we're on the porch, and Bob took a step back, and he said, "Listen to me. I'm 57 years old, and I don't need this job, and I don't need your bull." Oh. I said, "Bob, that's not a vote we're going to count on today." As we walked down the street, you could still hear these people yelling at us. It was really pretty funny. Bob has shown his loyalty to his principles, to what he believes in, uncompromising values, never back down approach. Bob receives this very well-deserved award today, a recognition for all that he has done, and he deserves, and he's earned through the pro-life service. Bob is a big fan of President Lincoln. You must remember President Lincoln said that some things legally right are not morally right. That is something that Bob Joyce has lived by. Bob has known all along what is morally right, and he continues to work and sacrifice in order to elevate the legal status of the unborn children, because he knows that is unquestionably the morally right path to follow. Adhere to your purpose, Lincoln said. That's what Bob Joyce has done. He's adhered to the purpose through thick and thin, through ups and downs, through good court decisions and bad court decisions. Adhere to your purpose, Honest Abe told us. Let none falter. Who thinks he is right, and we must succeed. Bob Joyce has never faltered, whether it's in the court of law, in the court of public or opinion, or even in his fabled exploits on the basketball court. No, Bob has never faltered. And I do want to share one more story about the political campaign with Bob. Competitiveness is something that he just breathes. One day we were out walking around, and we had stopped at a couple of courts, and we kind of decided that we were going to compete a little bit on the court. I don't know, I think we played 3 or 4 games, and Bob smoked me in the first 3 games. And then I won the 4th game. And as we were walking away, I was starting to feel pretty good. And Bob looked over and he said, "Hey Jim, I just want to let you know I felt bad, so I let you win the last one." Well, that competitive nature is still with Bob today. A couple of weeks ago, I called him, and he's had his knee surgery, and I figured I'd start off with a joke, and I said, "Hey Bob, what about a little game of one-on-one tomorrow?" He said, "Lyons, that's the only way you would ever beat me." Among pro-lifers, Bob Joyce always stood tall. Bob possesses what Abraham Lincoln considered the most important quality in a person: character. Bob is a man of character, unwavering, unyielding in the things that he knows. As Thomas More knew, and as Abraham Lincoln knew, do the morally right thing. Character is like a tree. Reputation merely like a shadow. The shadow is what we think of. The tree is the real thing. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have the real thing, joined together to honor a man with real and lasting character, my good friend Bob Joyce.
Who I work with now, I authorized him to go to the Home Depot and buy a long pole with a hook at the end. If I talk too long, I wanted him to come up and just put it around my neck and drag me off. So if I talk too long, it's not just my fault, it's also Jason O'Dwyer's fault. It's very easy for me to receive this award humbly. I mean, after all, we're talking about the Lord High Chancellor of England, and more importantly, a saint. And when you look at the past recipients of the award, it should be clear that many of them have made far more effective contributions to this cause than mine. You know, when Colby and I practiced law for a few years, I remember several wonderful conversations. One dealt with humility. And Colby mentioned, I think she was channeling a saint, but I don't remember which one. And she said it's important to be humble by recognizing the reasons why we should be humble. And I kind of factored that against two other statements that I had heard. And one was that reputation is what men think of us, and character is what God and the angels know of us. And Abraham Lincoln, who said that he had no particular ambition so great as having the esteem of his fellow men by earning their esteem. So it was clear to Lincoln that reputation without character was meaningless. And I look around this room and I see character abounds, and it's only with gratitude to be among you, and with hopes of ultimately being adjudged of sufficient character to be considered for eternal reward that I accept this award. It was 1999 Henry Hyde accepted this award. I had seen him 5 years earlier at the Massachusetts Citizens for Life Assembly for Life. He was 75 years old. His hair was all white. And he was quite overweight. And I saw him lumber across the stage from his chair to the podium with significant effort before delivering a powerfully inspiring talk about pro-life, the cause and its needs. He touched my heart that day. And I remember thinking, what you're saying is so important, but it's very clear that you need young legs. And I had young legs, relatively young legs at the time. And I determined right then and there that I was going to increase my effort in this cause. And it's my hope, it's my prayer that something you hear today might similarly inspire you to increase your efforts. I want to talk about what I think, how I think you can help me, why I think men should be more involved than we have been, and I want to talk about a few men who can serve as inspirations for us. How can you help? You can help us stop Boston authorities from covering up facts about the 4 frozen baby infants that were found in foil-wrapped boxes in a deep freeze in South Boston in November of 2022. We've written to 11 public agencies who should be involved. We've received perfunctory responses from 2 of them and no responses from the other 11. We should not allow that to happen. And we know that members of the Pregnancy Care Alliance of Massachusetts and other pregnancy health centers are under grossly unfair assault by the governor, by the attorney general, and by the Department of Public Health. And we know that they need help, and we're trying to help them. And maybe we can start by looking at the facts about the unfairness, about the hypocrisy of the Massachusetts Superior Courts and of the Department of Public Health as they deal with abortion-informed consent forms and Mary Moe procedures. Mary Moe procedures, as most of you know, are the petitions by which minors can obtain abortion permission without the knowledge or consent of their parents. And abortion consent forms are statutorily required from the Department of Public Health. Let's think about Mary Moe petitions for a minute. If you read the Superior Court guidelines, you will find that they suggest that the judge not inquire, I say not inquire, into whether or not the minor considers that she is carrying an unborn child, and not inquire whether she considers that she is in some way destroying life. Now, one courageous Superior Court judge, in commenting on those procedures, stated that they promote dishonesty, that they endorse a disregard for familial values, and that they disrespect the family unit. We should not let the Superior Court get away with what they are doing. And how about the Department of Public Health abortion consent forms? They don't even mention the possibility, the risk of mental health consequences from abortion. This at a time when throughout Massachusetts, girls and women, oftentimes alone in their apartments or their homes, are witnessing the expulsion of the bloody remains of their 10-week-old children, dead children, in their hands or on their beds or on the floors or in the toilets. It is shameful that any public agency, and it's also at a time after the Supreme Court, way back in 1992, acknowledged that women can suffer severe psychological consequences later in life by finding that their abortion was not fully informed. It's shameful what the Department of Public Health is doing. It's unfair, not only to the girls and the women involved, but it's unfair to womanhood itself. And we should not let them get away with that. Let's get real. Who's deceiving whom here? It's not the pregnancy health centers. It's our own public officials. And we should not let them get away with that. And you can help us continue to help courageous Massachusetts physicians who are standing up for life against a very resistant Massachusetts Medical Society. And you can help us resist major hospitals which are unilaterally imposing do not resuscitate orders and denying life-sustaining treatment against the wishes of the patients and or their healthcare proxies. We should not let the hospitals get away with that. And importantly, we can promote pro-life conversations. Let's face it, it's difficult in this day of sound bites and tweets to have a meaningful discussion with anybody about anything, much less something as sensitive as abortion. So how might we promote pro-life conversations without risking alienating our neighbors, our friends, or our family? Maybe we can suggest an acceptable minimal time limit, and give the other person the absolute freedom to end the conversation immediately at their request. Maybe we should consider emailing us, our friends, something like this. I believe justice requires truth, and that I have a responsibility to help create a just community. I'd like to talk with you. If it makes you uncomfortable and you want me to stop, just tell me and I'll stop immediately. I believe our laws should protect human life from conception through natural death. And I would like to discuss this with you for 10 minutes or longer, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with my belief. Can we talk? You know, salespeople in their training are told that they might have to make cold calls on 15 or 20 prospects before they make a single sale. Well, we might have to make send 15 or 20 of these emails before we open up a meaningful pro-life conversation. But wouldn't it be worth it? What can we talk about? Well, we can talk about Massachusetts Molst forms, which Attorney Stewart has done so much good work on, the medical options for life-sustaining treatment in Massachusetts. They're deadly, they're filled with hidden traps, and they deceive patients. And if you want to learn more, go to our website. And we can talk about in vitro fertilization and embryonic stem cell research. If you look at the laminated card at your table there, you'll see it contains Tom Harvey's clever acronym, AHUG. A-H-U-G-G, AHUG, AHUG. Alive, human, unique, growing, guiltless. These are all adjectives that describe the immediate results of conception. And we can look at what the Alabama Supreme Court just said about in vitro fertilization. Now, our laws are different from Alabama, and that case only dealt with Alabama law. But there were some things, there was some language in that opinion that can motivate us. The majority opinion said, all parties, like all members of this court, agree that an unborn child is a genetically unique human being whose life begins at fertilization and ends at death. And then the Chief Justice went on to say, and listen to this, quote, and each human being from the moment of conception is made in the image of God, created by him to reflect his likeness, close quote. Those statements are true in Alabama, and they're true in Massachusetts. They're true everywhere. And, of course, you can help PLLDF fly its flag throughout Massachusetts. We're trying to fly it in cities and towns, and at parishes and Christian schools, and at Knights of Columbus councils, so you can help us do that. And of course, you can consider making a tax-deductible donation. Now, why did I say that I thought men should be more involved in this effort? Well, it's because since Roe v. Wade, since the Roe and Doe cases, men have been totally excluded by the state and federal courts. We've been pushed to the sideline as if we have no interest. Roe and Doe didn't even mention a male's procreative interests. It talked about a newfound right, a woman's newfound right to privacy, and the government's interest in fetal life. It essentially made women autonomous, anonymous, and severed from their traditional marriage situation. It was actually somewhat Marxist. I hope it was inadvertent, but Marxism, of course, seeks to destroy the nuclear family. And think of the words of Kate Millett, who was the Marxist communist co-founder of the National Organization of Women, who said, the complete destruction of the traditional family and of the traditional marriage and its nuclear family is the revolutionary or utopian goal of feminism. And the courts, it got even worse in time, because the Supreme Court said that it was unconstitutional for a state to require a wife to get her husband's consent for an abortion. And then it got even worse when the Supreme Court said that it's unconstitutional for a state to even require a wife to tell her husband that she's thinking about having an abortion. So much for the nuclear family. Now, it's time really for men to step up and defend our procreative rights. Good women want good men to be by their side, protecting their children, protecting them, protecting their families. And men have a duty to do this, and it's a duty that doesn't just fall upon the religious. It falls upon the non-religious too. Let's consider the non-religious. Why should a non-religious man want to step up? How about because he has a civic duty? How about the Pledge of Allegiance, in which we pledge for liberty and justice for all? Not just for the living, but for all, born and unborn. How about the Constitution, which in its preamble states a purpose that we should be securing the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity? Our posterity is defined as descendants of people and future generations. Well, the unborn qualify on each count, don't they? But for the religious man, it's not just a civic duty. It is a civic duty, but it's also a religious duty. It's found, it's what we mean when we pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And it's our duty to stand between people and evil. It's our duty to accept responsibility and not to run away from it. Let's look at some male role models. Let's look at Dr. Bernard Nathanson. Let's look at Henry Hyde. Let's look at William Wilberforce, and let's look at Dr. Joseph Stanton. Dr. Bernard Nathanson was a co-founder of NARAL. He was known as America's abortion king. He claimed responsibility for 75,000 abortions, including 2 of his own children. His is perhaps the most extraordinary story of fatal mistake, discovery, regret, repentance, and redemption. Ultrasound technology showed him that the unborn was a person, and that he had 2 patients, not just the woman, but the patient and the unborn child. And he had a conversion. He resigned from NARAL, and he spent the rest of his life advocating for pro-cause internationally. In 2011, when he was dying of cancer, he gave an interview to Mrs. Terry Beatley from Virginia. Terry said that she was inspired to request the interview, never thinking that she would get it, but she got it. And at the end of that interview, she asked Dr. Nathanson if there's anything that he would like her to tell the people on his behalf. And this is what he said. Teach America the strategy of how I deceived America. But also deliver this special message. Tell them that the co-founder of NARAL says to love one another. Abortion is not love. Stop the killing. I'm all about love now. Now I suggest that if Babe Ruth were here to talk to us about baseball, we would listen. And when the abortion king talks to us about abortion, we should listen. So Terry Beatley founded the Hosea Initiative, a 501c3, and she's going all around the whole nation teaching Dr. Nathanson's legacy. We have some representatives of Hosea here today with us, and they have some literature that they'd love to give to you after the event. May I ask the representatives of Hosea to please stand? Let's give them a hand. They're doing a great job. I'd like to talk about Hyde and Wilberforce in connection with the current debate about the approach to abolishing abortion, the so-called personhood approach versus the incremental approach. Now, the incremental approach, as you know, allows for some exceptions for abortions, such as in cases of rape or incest, and or after certain gestational stages. The personhood approach does not allow for those. I suggest that within the pro-life community, we can all be peaceful siblings in the quest to abolish abortion. Even if you are for personhood, you can tolerate incrementalism. Other major social organizations have done just that before they've achieved ultimate success. In fact, Henry Hyde, for the first Hyde Amendment in 1976, there were no exceptions. And then it developed that there were exceptions for the life of the mother. And then in 1993, Hyde himself offered exceptions for rape and incest, explaining at the time, in his words, that he didn't believe the votes were there anymore for a straight ban on abortion funding. And William Wilberforce took a staggered approach. Many of you know that Wilberforce is the person who is generally attributed for the success of the abolition of the African slave trade and for the abolition of slavery in England. He didn't set out originally to abolish slavery. He set out to end the African slave trade in the British colonies. He accomplished that in 1807. One commentator wrote that at the time he understood that total abolition at that point was, quote, a bridge too far. But he kept at it. He understood that there would be stops along the way before he could totally abolish slavery. And he accepted those stops. And in 1833, 26 years later, slavery was abolished in all of England. How would we feel if 26 years from Dobbs, we accomplished the total abolition of abortion in America? Total abolition by the year 2048. Or even sooner if we work more effectively. I'd like to talk a little bit about Wilberforce's, what else can we learn from Wilberforce? Well, one of his primary tools in abolishing slavery involved the slave ship called the Brooks. Now, he made illustrations of the Brooks ship. And he duplicated them endlessly. And he posted them everywhere. And he accompanied them with narrative descriptions of the conditions on the Brooks ship. And they showed and they described human beings being packed literally like sardines in the lower deck of the Brooks. And those who wouldn't fit were stacked on shelves in recumbent position with less than 3 feet clearance. And they were handcuffed and they were shackled. And oftentimes they couldn't make it to the latrine buckets that were at each end of the lower deck. And one person described the lower deck of the Brooks as so filled with excrement and blood and mucus that it resembled the floor of a slaughterhouse. We can learn another lesson from Wilberforce. He did not try to humiliate his opponents. Rather, he countered their false accounts with facts and more facts. He said, "I mean not to accuse anyone, but to take the shame upon myself, in common indeed with the whole Parliament of Great Britain, for having suffered this horrid trade to be carried on under our authority. We are all guilty. We ought all to plead guilty and not to exculpate ourselves by throwing the blame on others." I think of a concept that came to me when my dear father passed away in 1994. I call it enabling humility. Isn't there something that opens our hearts when we encounter a genuinely humble person? And once our hearts are opened, isn't that person empowered to influence us by the very same qualities that led to that understanding and that quality? I suspect that that was a real power of Wilberforce, and I suggest that we can make it a real power in our efforts. Wilberforce fought the false accounts with facts and more facts. Let's consider what we can do with facts in our environment. How about two common statements made by the other side? My body, my choice. And the embryo is too small to be considered a person. Well, let's deal with the first one. My body, my choice. Maybe we can simply ask a question. Can one body have two heads, two hearts, two different blood types, 4 legs and 4 arms? And maybe we could rely on the words of Abraham Lincoln, who asked, if you call a tail a leg, how many legs has a dog? 5? No, calling a tail a leg doesn't make it a leg. And how about the argument about, oh, the embryo is too small to be a person? How about just saying, well, most of us have had the experience of taking off on an airplane and seeing full-size human figures fade into raisin-like appearances as we elevate before being totally out of view. Now, after they're out of view, isn't it true that they remain fully human? Well, of course it is. And we can supplement that with medical technology, contact embryoscopy, which enables us to see exactly what's going on in the womb. A very thin metal probe with a microscopic camera is passed painlessly through a woman's cervix and photographs what's happening in the womb. It shows us in living color a human beating heart, 113 beats a minute at just 4.5 weeks after conception. That's a powerful tool, and it's available on our website. I've shown that to many people, and they're dumbfounded. They're amazed and they're dumbfounded. I want to tell you just 2 quick stories about a governor who we know, a former governor who we know, and a mayor who we know. And I had the occasion to talk with them about the science of human development one time, and I asked them if they knew about contact embryoscopy. No, they didn't. I asked them if I could show them the imagery. They said I could. The governor said, well, that's powerful. He said, it's true. New science is teaching us things about human development. And I said, well, Governor, that's not exactly true. You see, this has been around for 25 years. It's not new. It's just that you're not looking at it, and the people that you're surrounding yourself with are not telling you about it. And the mayor said to me before seeing this, when I was talking to him about the science of human embryology, he grabbed me by my right arm affectionately because I knew him well. And he said, come on, Bob, it's not about science, it's about religion. And I said, can I show you some imagery? And I did. And he was silent. And I said to him, I want to ask you to do 2 favors for me. Tomorrow morning when you're shaving, I want you to look yourself in the mirror, and without taking your eyes away from the glance, I want you to ask yourself this question: have I been wrong all this time about the scientific origins of human development? And your answer has to be yes. And then, without taking your eyes away from that mirror, I want you to ask the follow-up question: am I going to have the courage to be publicly correct? He didn't answer either of those questions. I've seen him a couple of times since. He hasn't changed his view, but at least we planted a seed. And that's what conversations are about. We never know what the effect is going to be. But what we do, some good advice that my father gave me when I was practicing law, he said, just act, don't react. Just do what's right, no matter what. And that's what we can do. I think that our effectiveness in our advocacy is going to depend upon how well we advocate for truth. It has been said that the degree to which truth is evident in any society is dependent upon the courage and the faith of the people. Courage to discover and defend the truth, whether it be comforting or disturbing, and faith that the people and the laws will treat the truth fairly. We can do well in our advocacy by listening to the sage advice of the patriarch of the pro-life movement in Massachusetts, Dr. Joseph Stanton, who advised us that protection of innocent human life in its most fragile and awesome beginning, across the long day, and at its so often dependent close, is at once the highest privilege and the greatest obligation of a caring and humane society. This struggle involves our bodies, our minds, and our souls. The sum total of all of the precious gifts that have been bestowed on each one of us by a loving Creator. And we can recognize that without Him, we cannot succeed. But with Him, we cannot fail. Let me close by offering a poem that I wrote in the very same year that I met Henry Hyde. I call it Awakening. As radiance bursts from sunrise flame, and life erupts from whence it came, as rivers roar with awesome force, and eagles soar their steady course, 'tis then a wonder fills my heart at how this glory had its start. As science learns a newfound fact, and people try new ways to act, as mindless sin stains man and wife, and virus drains the breath from life, 'tis then a terror fills my mind. Will God lose patience with mankind? In lessons learned from battles fought is found revealed of what we ought. The time is now, the challenge clear. Find joy in truths we once held dear. To mind and heart, just add the soul. Those precious 3 will make us whole. And so I ask each one of you, and especially you with young legs, can you give us a hand? Thank you very much. God bless you all. God bless you. For those very inspirational words. These are great speakers.